Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Here we go. Another series of You Asked and I Will Answer. You didn't think I was going to. In fact, maybe you didn't even ask a question. Maybe you just commented and you thought that it would fly under the radar, that I would just let it go. Maybe it was on somebody else's video. I wouldn't come across that. I'm never on YouTube. I wouldn't just be searching the comments, looking for people that I can respond to. I wouldn't waste my time like that. What are you, crazy? In fact, that's exactly what I do, because I'm not working today. So here we go. Let's get started with our very first question. And this one comes from VFX Productions RT. And this was on a video that I made about using the Source 4 style spotlight LEDs to raise ambient inside of a room. And the problem with doing that when you have haze inside of the room. I'll actually link to the original video in the description below so you can see that original video and exactly what we're talking about here. And the question is there a way to do that Source 4 bounce light off the wall trick if the room has a lot more haze, but without it showing the beam of light? That is a very good question. The answer is no. If you have a lot of haze in the room, you're going to see where the light is coming from. But why would you have more haze than this in the room? I would even say that this is probably too much haze. And the way that I gauge how much haze is too much haze is that if you can see the haze on camera, it's too much haze. Right? Like there should be no reason that people are inside of their homes without the fire alarm going off if you can see the haze. And you think, well, okay, well, what's the advantage of using haze and not being able to see the haze in the frame? Well, that's when it gets so fine, right? The haze distribution throughout the air in the room gets so fine that you can't actually see it on camera. What you can do is you can feel it mostly in the shadows, but also in the highlights. If you're looking at a window, like in this specific video, you can just sort of feel those soften. Right? It's almost like a low contrast filter, but it's just applied throughout the entire room. Now, then you can still, if you're lighting like from a top angle, or if you're lighting trying the overhead ambient bounce, sometimes you can still see it in the room, but it gets significantly easier. I would say if you're going to use the spotlight ambient in the room, which I would 100% recommend all the time for every interior. If I'm ever shooting a location interior, the number one thing is, well, it's going to take the most amount of time or effort or work, any of those, to be able to manipulate the ambient in the room. Okay? Because if I'm lighting from outside, depending on the angle that you can get into the window, what's going to happen is it's going to hit a whole bunch of walls. And if you've got white walls, it's going to spread everywhere. And that's going to either raise the ambient too much, or maybe the window is too small and you're not able to get enough level in, and you have dark walls and the ambient is going to be too low. It's like the thing that takes the longest on any set is adjusting the overall ambient for a wide shot. As you get in tighter, it gets easier because there's less room in the background to actually be lighting for. But for the wide shot, that's the hardest bit. And then it's like, okay, we have to make a sacrifice. Are we going to expose to the ambient, or are we going to try and override the ambient with the light outside? That's the decision that you have to make on the day. Usually it comes down to what is going to be less work, what's going to be quicker. And 9 times out of 10, it's not caring about the ambient, pumping in whatever light you have, because chances are it's not going to be an 18K, right? It's not going to be an M90. You're probably going to push through the window with an M40 or an M18, and then you're not going to have enough punch. That'll be okay for the key. It's not going to be enough punch to fill the rest of the room. And if you know anything about exposure, what gives that sourcey feel is the ratio difference between whatever's in the background, the solid mass of background. I'm not talking about where you pepper in little highlights, but the solid mass of background versus the foreground. Right? That's what feels lit, is when those ratios are very far apart. So to bring those closer together, if you have underpowered lights lighting from outside, you don't want to cut the level on the light, right? Because if you cut the level on the light, then we're working in smaller and smaller amounts of actual level. And that means that the spill will start to affect the image more than it was before. We're trying to separate those values as far apart as possible. And it's that separation where you can then have control. If you're knocking the light on the level down on the key, and the ambient is quite high already, it's going to get really flat really quickly, and getting shape is going to be significantly harder. Rather, what you should do is you should light from the window with your little fixture as much as you can, get that level perfect, and then you raise ambient inside with the Source 4. I call it a Source 4, but it's any spotlight now with the LED numbers. Now you don't even have to net it down or gel it or put in a wire. You don't have to do any of that stuff. It's so simple and it's so dialed in. And you can use the barn doors, or the little, what do they call them? The little things on the Source 4s. I forget what they're called. The curtains, whatever. And you can make just a little tiny box right above the person. And you don't get any, I mean, you do get a little bit of spill off the sides, but it's negligible as to how much you're the increase in your control of the ambient. So ambient on location is can be a pain in the ass to deal with before this solution. It used to be like we had rigs of Titan tubes that you would bring in on like an 8x8 frame, and you would try and put them directly above the action during a wide shot, and that would like set your ambient. Because what you're going for when it's ambient, you're going for like you can't even tell. If you're looking at the image, you can't tell where the light is coming from. It just sort of falls like, snow on where you want it to fall. That could be background, that could be foreground, it could be the subject that you're trying for. But really, it's just like overall base exposure. Then you're coming in and slashing with the key light. You're coming in and slashing with the background. If you're going to soft hop across the background or add some slash, then you're adding on top of that. But that base ambient, sometimes you don't want to just accept what is there because you don't have the lights large enough to overpower it. If that is the case, I would advocate for every single setup, like every setup that you go into or that I go into. I'm saying to the grips, everywhere that the camera isn't looking, well, like the camera isn't looking at these two walls behind me now, if we're on a location scout, we're not looking there. So just have T-bars of neg on both of those walls, or tape them to the walls, or find whatever the easiest solution is to get neg on both of those walls. It's like, well, maybe I'm going to use that. Maybe I'm not going to use it. It's definitely easier to just pull the neg back than it is to set it up if it's not already in there. Same goes for the ambient. I'm asking the gaffer every single location that we step into on this job, I would like the ambient Source 4 rig set up. Right? Maybe we use it, maybe we don't use it, but it takes 5 minutes to set up if you do it ahead of time. If you are waiting until you're just about to roll, first of all, everyone's not happy because they've looked at the lighting. They just say something's off. And you go, aha, I remember the ambient trick that Patrick talked about. Let's bring that thing in. Well, then they got to go to the truck. They got to get it out of the truck. They got to fumble around. You got 20 people watching, 2 electricians fumble around trying to set this thing up. Then they point it in the wrong spot. You got like all the pressure is on you when you could have easily avoided all of that. You could easily have said before, just make sure this thing is on set, ready to go in every single setup. We probably won't use it in every single setup. Ideally, we don't, because that's another step that we have to then balance to. It'd be better if we just had the right setup the first time and the lights came in and everything looked great. That would be better. This is a solution for when things don't go as planned. So there really is no way to do it. Back to the original question, if you overhaze, but I would say you shouldn't be overhazing. And there's also some questions that I get. It's like, okay, well, how do you determine the haze and who's responsible for the haze on the sets that you're on? Ideally, if you're working on a proper film, right, there's someone looking after the haze. It's not you. On my set, because everybody, and I mean every single person on set, despises the haze. Focus pullers don't like it. First ADs despise it. Sometimes you got the director on board, sometimes not. Producers hate it because it takes forever to get it right and to the right level, and you have to hold everyone up. This is where, if you don't mind being the only one who wants to do something or the only one with an idea on set, you're going to make a very good cinematographer, right? Because if you've never been on a set where you have decided to hit the haze button and you've hazed up the entire room, and now you have to sit around for 5 minutes doing nothing while the haze settles, and like you'll get some electricians or the grips to start like wafting it through the room, it's an uncomfortable 5 minutes. And then the first AD will come up to you 5 times in that 5 minutes saying, can we shoot now? Like, are we ready? And you'll be like, I mean, we could. It's not going to match anything that we did before. And we probably just want to let it settle. And then they come back a minute later. Can we go now? You're like, no. It's like the pressure builds every single time. If you're comfortable with the pressure of being like, well, it's not ready yet, and we're just going to have to wait, because when it is ready, then it's going to be awesome, and I will make that call when it's awesome. If you're happy doing that, I mean, it's much like if you're happy with other people, 99% of the time, everybody on set, whether they tell you to your face or not, they think that they could do it better. They think that their way of lighting, that their way of framing would all be better. So already you should be comfortable with the fact that everybody on set is sort of a space cadet, right? It's like, I've sort of figured out this is what we're going to do. Someone has to lead the team and has to have an end point in mind and a direction that we're all striving towards. And I'm just happy that I'll say, yes, this is good. No, this is not good. And I cannot take into account anyone else's feelings or the way they think they should do it, because you get too many cooks in the kitchen, all of a sudden it's hot garbage. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. Many thanks for checking this out. If you like this content, if you want more of the breakdowns, more of the technical stuff, the best spot to get that is over on Patreon. Link is in the description below. I could not do these videos without that support. Many thanks, and we will see you in the next one. Goodbye.